So I have a question about the labels for elotuzumab and for FDA-approved labels here in this country and for ixazomib. Were both, if I recall rightly, both said you only had to receive one prior therapy.
Correct.
What does that mean to you? Does that mean you wait for first relapse, or does that mean you, if you're not tolerating your upfront therapy, you can switch? What is, or add? You have any thoughts on that, Sagar?
Yeah, I actually haven't thought about it that way. I mean, I think about it typically.
Well, what good are you? I'm going to ask somebody else.
Well, in some prior labels, the FDA has come down and defined what a line of therapy is, which is, induction, transplant, maintenance is all considered one line of therapy. But I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that sometimes people may progress on a combination bortezomib-lendex, and that's in some ways worse than having had a long, quote, one line of
Interesting enough,
therapy.
I think here they don't talk about lines of therapy, though. They just talk about prior therapy.
Yeah, right. So I think that's an interesting thing. I think the data support in 1 to 3 lines of relapse to myeloma, but the label actually says after 1 prior therapy, so you technically don't need to relapse after first-line therapy.
So would you use it in maintenance? Or?
That's, I think, a nuance. I would, in high-risk patients, potentially we have a trial with lenalidomide plus ixazomib as maintenance therapy post-transplant, 64 patients that will present here. And so I think there's safe, it's very well tolerated. We need more phase 3 data and more data to support that combination. Maybe in high-risk patients, I think it plays a role there. So.
All right, so...
Can I just add one quick comment? So, I think we talked about POM and a lot of the partner drugs in that relapse space with ELO and DARA and carfilzomib, but then panabinostat, I think,
Thank
still
you. I
plays
was going to say we haven't talked about the one that was approved first, which was panabinostat.
And so I think,
talk about the Panorama trial. Paul was the PI, so let's let him tell us about the Panorama trial.
I mean, Jatin's very kind to say that. I think that the bottom line with panabinostat is the addition of panabinostat to the bortezomib dexamethasone platform.
And maybe just the audience, what is panabinostat?
Well, yeah, of course. Panabinostat's in obviously completely novel mechanism of action. It's in the histone deacetylase inhibitor class, and it builds on the early work done with voronostat, which unfortunately didn't translate into something considered meaningful enough to go forward with approval. But very importantly, panabinostat followed up on it and has actually shown clinical benefit in the randomized setting. And that clinical benefit was a solid 4.5 months, which is very similar to what we've obviously seen in other settings as well. And what was particularly impressive and led to the accelerated approval was the subgroup of patients in whom the biggest benefit was seen. And actually the PFS benefit in the bortezomib-exposed lenalidomide-resistant, bortezomib-resistant patients was no less than 7 months. So I think that, just to be clear, it's lenalidomide-resistant because to be in the trial you had to be bortezomib-sensitive. So, but my point is that in those refractory patients, the PFS difference was very impressive. So I think that it supports clearly the accelerated approval. I think the challenge for panabinostat in Panorama 1 was the way we built the trial at the time was with intravenous bortezomib twice a week. It was a registration study, so changing it midstream was not feasible. And so a lot of the toxicities we encountered, we can actually get around with subcutaneous bortezomib on the one hand, weekly on the other. And the reality, too, that in our experience anyway, HDACs actually combine very favorably with IMiDs. And I think that's a whole new direction that's being explored.
And wasn't it, I seem to recall there was a carfilzomib trial that also looked quite well tolerated, is that right?
I think there's 2 important trials, actually. So carfilzomib plus panabinostat, and there's a trial that Dr. Lonial did with his team, Dr. Kaufman, and as well as at MD Anderson, where we looked at carfilzomib plus panobinostat and really shown that's actually a rather well-tolerated regimen. We don't see the same GI toxicities that we saw in the Panorama 1 study with less than 5% and very active combination. Dr. Chari also did a trial with lenalidomide and panabinostat, which I thought was very compelling data.
I'm feeling left out again here.
Sorry.
I'm having deja vu because we were all at the FDA together talking about this. So.
But that's very compelling data that you can comment on. But I think that there's still a role for panabinostat with different partner drugs, including potentially pomalidomide. So that's why I just wanted to bring that up. I think it's important in this early lines of therapy.
So novel mechanisms of action, better tolerability with sub-Q weekly Velcade or with or bortezomib, or with some of the newer combinations that you've all worked on with carfilzomib. And so certainly, what kind of patient would you, I do want to spend some time here on daratumumab, but just very briefly, what kind of patients would you give panabinostat
So
to?
just to speak to the study that Jatin was referring to, it was Pano-Lendex, where the panabinostat was given week 1 and week 3. Week 2 was off, and standard Lendex. And even in a very Len refractory population, almost 90%, The response rates were about 40%. PFS was about 6.5 months, even in that population. So I think this is a completely oral regimen, and it's very well tolerated. And importantly, we had no GI issues. Not one patient had to have dose modification for GI problem. Main complications were cytopenias, which is expected and manageable.
Did they require routine antiemetics or Imodium or anything? Nothing?
Yeah, excellent tolerability. So I think the key is the partner that you give it with. And I think we have a lot of options now, and you could partner with any of these agents.
Yeah, and if I may, Ajay, I would agree with you. And I think the other thing to share here is that obviously this was such an important approval in my view because it opened the door to the HDAC class, which had been closed previously. And at this meeting, there's some very nice data that Sagar and I are both involved in with the HDAC6 selective inhibitor, AC1215, and now the new one, AC241, where this concept of the IMiD partner is really validated because with POM, for example, it's an excellent platform.